I first played Psychonauts around the time it came out on the original Xbox, though only for a few hours as I was around a friend's house at the time. I didn't buy the game because, well, I was a broke kid back then. Fast forward a few years ago, hearing that Psychonauts 2 was in development, I decided to purchase the first game and play through it. And it had its jank, but overall I felt it held up very, very well today. Not because of the platforming, but because of the creativity it offered, the wacky world it allowed me to explore, and the level of storytelling that was well ahead of its time for a game that was first released in 2005. I'm pleased to say that the second game brings forward much of the creativity of the first game, but how well does it hold up overall? And where the first game really felt ahead in ways for its time, did the second game do anything to try and be new and interesting? In this review, I'll be taking a deep look into all of Psychonauts 2's mechanics, level design and story, so there will be spoilers. When you first boot up Psychonauts 2, it plays a recap of the first game's story, catching you up with what's going on, and though I'd only played through Psychonauts 1 2 years ago, I still needed it. I remembered much about the original, its world and its characters, still vivid images in my mind, but the story was not one of them. And to touch on this lightly now, Psychonauts 2 is the same way. It does some great work with characters. I mean, how can it not when you're exploring their brains for most of the game? And when the story is moving, it's great. But like the first game, there isn't much actual story. Now I need to caveat this by saying that we get more story in this game than most games, but this game in particular just felt like it needed more. The game starts off with a level inside Loboto's mind, the villain from the first game, as our heroes are trying to find out who the spy in the Psychonauts is. And almost immediately I found there was a very different philosophy in level design between Psychonauts 1 and Psychonauts 2. In Psychonauts 1, many of the levels revolved around utilising Raz's new psychic ability. For example, the first level is a military obstacle course designed to introduce core game mechanics such as jumping and climbing. The third level in Mila's brain is a more laid-back disco world that introduces the ability to use levitation like a ball. The first level in Psychonauts 2 introduces a new ability, Pyromancy, but apart from burning a portrait or two down, it doesn't really get much use in the level. The level feels less focused on making challenges for the player to use their new ability on, and more about creating a thematical world around the brain of the character with light platforming. And the majority of the levels in the game are like this. If you've played the first game, you can also tell there is considerably less jank. Movement feels clean and combat feels crisp, at least for the most part. I did notice that even when dodging, I could still be hit by enemies, and some of which hone in on Raz. As well, there is no clear indicator if an enemy is stunned or not, making melee difficult if you don't want to be hit. It would have been nice for the devs to have added iframes to dodging to make melee combat more viable. And also dodge controls were not as responsive as I would have liked though. I guess I can't hope that every game has the responsiveness of Devil May Cry. Can I? We also learn how to level up Raz in the first game. This can be done in a number of ways, from collecting images, to collecting 9 psi cards, to finding special items, to finding emotional baggage. Pretty much everything you do in the game, apart from getting to the end of the level, levels you up. And perhaps annoyingly, because many people may just want to rush to the end of the level, leveling up feels a little bit pointless. You can upgrade your abilities, but with perhaps the exception of the Ricochet and Psyblast, none of the power-ups feel that strong. And none of the badges you can unlock feel like they change much. Which brings me to another point. There is another currency in this game for purchasing items from the shop. This is supposed to be rewarded from defeating enemies, but I don't know if this was bugged or not because they barely dropped any currency, and the currency they did drop disappears too quickly. When I was in a battle a lot of the time, I was concentrating on the enemies too much to actually go and collect the currency before it vanished. I'd say about 90% of the currency I collected was via drops in the overworld, which respawned whenever you changed rooms. It would have been nice if the game gave you currency from completing side quests as well. As well as health items, the main thing you can spend currency on is badges, which augment Raz's powers. However, none of them felt very impactful, and for some stupid reason you can only equip 3 at a time. But anyway, back to the game. Soon after the first level we reach the Motherlobe, headquarters of the Psychonauts, and we get to explore. This along with the next level were probably some of my favourite parts of the game. We get some cool interactions with the interns, and it introduces the concept of changing mental links within someone's mind to change their perception on things. This is represented like a puzzle in the game where you must connect the right ideas together. This really excited me, thinking of the puzzles where you would need to change someone's perception of something, and then in turn that would make that character do something in the real world. Different combinations and different characters could also unlock cool secrets. But alas, this idea only lasted for this early level and was pretty much some of the only puzzling in the game. The Hospital Casino level is like the first level, with mostly light platforming and some use of Raz's new power. I do have to commend the level, and in fact all the levels in this game, for how they look. The hospital has pill containers as tables and heart rate monitors as gambling screens. Everything is so perfectly themed. This level also finishes with a cool set piece, though this is one of the only levels where this happens. Still, to this point, about 3 hours in, the game has been very well paced and pretty consistent in introducing new powers and concepts. This is where that ends, however. The game now asks you to put back together Ford's mind, and well, be prepared for 6 hours of effectively side questing, while the story comes to a complete standstill. This is another change to game design compared to the first game. In Psychonauts 1 there was, for the most part, only one world you could do at a time, but each world provided new powers and you were rewarded for completing each level with more story. In Psychonauts 2, the game wants to give you the freedom to tackle levels in the order you wish, but because of this, you don't really get any significant power-ups, and neither are you rewarded with more story until all 3 levels have been completed. The game wants to give players the freedom to tackle objectives in the order they want, but fails to understand how to implement this properly. I can understand the developers wanting to give players more freedom, but in this case I think it does more harm than good. When a game is too linear, it can often make players feel bad and restricted. A prime example of this is Final Fantasy XIII. However, when a game offers freedom, it can allow you to feel less restricted and not become bored of working on one task. God of War 2018 is a good example of this. Many of the parts of this game are linear, but at multiple points in the game you are encouraged to go out and explore and do side quests, most of which enhance the main story and offer rewards to power up Kratos. This is great because if you want to go on with the main quest and progress the story, you can, but if you feel like taking a break and side questing, you can do this for as long as you want, until you want to hop back into the main quest. Psychonauts 2 does not give you this choice, and that is the whole reason for giving players the option to tackle things in the order they would like. The game wants you to tackle the main quest almost like it is a side quest, eliminating that choice. And because you can tackle these in any order, the story does not progress, nor does Raz gain any new abilities. This might be okay for a game light on story, one that doesn't have you wanting to find out who the spy is, that they've put towards the player as a question, or if this section only took maybe 2 to 3 hours at most, but the whole thing takes 6+ hours, and I had only been playing for around 3 hours by this point. My choice is that I want to progress with the story, but the game says, well, to do that, first you need to go and get this spare brain, then you need to go and put the brain in the mailroom guy, then you need to go into his brain, which is a large level by the way, and fix him so he can open the door to the main room, which lets you go into Ford's brain, which is a half-size level, and yeah, now you've got to go and repeat that 2 more times if you want to continue on with the story. The levels you encounter during this time, though, are a mixture of good to great, with some being long and some being short. A standout is the Overcooked style world that has you picking up ingredients and running through an obstacle course in order to cook them. But though they are good, none of them match up to the greatness of the levels in Psychonauts 1. I won't get into them now, but I'm sure anyone that has played the first game will remember the Milkman, the fish monster level where Raz is effectively Godzilla, and the board game world. There were so many stellar classics in the first game, but for the most part, in the second, none live up to their creativity. After fixing Ford's mind, the story progresses and we discover some reveals, but the game does the same thing and lets the player tackle one of 2 levels in the order they want. But to progress, both levels need to be completed. Fortunately, after completing these worlds, we get the best world in the game. A theme park ride that doubles as explaining the villain's backstory and grand plan. The game then concludes with a slightly underwhelming boss fight. So I like the way the story begins, pretending like Raz has joined the Psychonauts when they are actually trying to work out who the spy is. It's a nice way of starting the game. Entering the Motherlode, we are introduced to all of the interns who first play a prank on Raz. The story then turned into a casino mission. This is where I found one of the problems with the story. Later on, the interns team up with Raz to fight the game's final boss, but never in the story do we feel like Raz has earned their respect. Raz joins the intern program and is put at the bottom of the flagpole by the other interns. No one wants to associate with him, he even messes up his teacher's mind, and their small moment of teamwork was not enough to rectify their image of him. The story then wants you to repair Ford's mind, the interns only turning up during this section in optional diversions. One of the strengths of Harry Potter was its world building. When you followed Harry's journey, you went to sit in class with him and learn about magic. Psychonauts 1 was the same. You wanted to learn about these psychic abilities, so you would think that joining the intern program of the Motherlode, you would get to learn more about this stuff, more than you would learn in a camp for kids. This is the time we get to learn adult stuff. But now, that sense of wonder is sparse in this game at best. It's around this time Raz talks to Lily's father, who tasks him with repairing Ford's mind, and that he is the only one he can trust to do this task due to the spy. By this point in the game we've been playing for about 3 to 4 hours, and the story has been slow, not completely slow, but slower paced than it should be. Therefore, this is the time the game decides to put a complete stop on the story and force you to repair Ford's mind, which takes another 5 to 6 hours. I mean, Raz's family is introduced during this time, but most of their interactions are optional, which is silly because all of it is to set up Raz's grandmother. Because after repairing Ford's mind, we learn that his grandmother is none other than the evil Molecular that the bad guy is trying to revive. Sucks to the players if they've never bothered interacting with her in the forest. But not only that, Ford was the one who made everyone believe that she was their grandmother when she's actually their great aunt. The game does actually manage to pull this off as being a bit climactic though. With Ford repaired, they head to somewhere to use a device to prevent Molecular from being revived. Oh, but in order to use the device, Raz needs to go into the brains of some old guys who used to be important or something to repair their issues. You'd think the Psychonauts, a team of professionals, could have done this way before a boy of 10 or 11 somehow does it for them, but I digress. They use the device on Raz's grandmother, but before it can work, Raz is pulled out by Lily's father, who's acting weird. Raz and Lily enter his brain to find out the truth. Lily's father is actually Nick from the mailroom. No, actually, this was actually pretty well done. We're tasked with getting a new brain for Nick earlier in the game, and he is put as Raz's mentor. So it was actually a pretty cool twist that I didn't see coming, and it makes your mind connect all the dots from all the hints that you've seen throughout the game, like Lily's father not wanting to talk to anyone that might realise it wasn't really him. But still, the fact that we never knew Nick before downplays the reveal a little. So hear me out. This is how things should have happened. Give the game time to set up at the beginning, introduce the interns who play pranks on Raz at the beginning, and introduce Nick as Raz's mentor. Nick and Raz can really take to each other, both being from Grulovia, which has been destroyed by Molecular. Nick turns out to be a great mentor, and Raz slowly changes the minds of the interns by helping them when they are in danger and fixing the problems of theirs. This could be a good opportunity to get to know each of them a little, and could be done instead of the massive amount of time it takes to fix Ford's brain. Then, just as they are getting close to figuring out who the spy is, the spy, masked, makes an appearance and attacks Raz and the others. Nick protects them and is left brainless, but the clue that they had on the spy is destroyed. Of course, this is the moment Nick changes his brain with Truman's, but to Raz and us, we now have a renewed resolve to find out who the spy is and punish him for hurting our mentor. This would make the reveal that Nick is the spy all the more impactful. But not only would it be a twist reveal, but Raz and we as the players would also be angered due to Nick playing us like a fiddle. The rest of the actual story is kind of whatever. The big bad gets resurrected and 5 minutes later gets beaten again. But I do think I'm being a little harsh on it. It's still better than most video game stories, but just not up to the standard that Psychonauts 2 really needed it to be. Psychonauts 2 is not as janky as the first game. It's a lot more clean and responsive, but doesn't provide any interesting platforming, and its main strength from the first game, the crazy worlds and inner minds of people, is a bit lacking in the second game. But I have to stress that the game is not bad. I have been nitpicking a lot because I like this game, and because the first game was so great. In the end, it feels like the devs of this game lacked a little bit of the wow factor seen in these games' levels. If you've played the first game, this game doesn't really do much better than improve upon the graphics. I enjoyed my time playing through this game, but at many times I wish it were more. I think if this is your first Psychonauts game, you may enjoy this more than I did, and I would highly recommend playing the first game after you're done. If you've played the first game, I would still recommend this game, but temper your expectations. It's a good game that stands on its own 2 feet against games coming out today. I'd give Psychonauts 2 a 7.5 out of 10, but with a recommendation to try it out. If you have an Xbox or a PC, you can try it out on Game Pass for free. I do think many of my nitpicks about this game though were subjective, so it's very likely that anyone playing this game may have a very good time with it. But anyway, this has been That's Effin' Rich. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked what you see here, please subscribe, hit the like button, maybe leave a comment, and I will see you in the next one.